You look at that and all those distractions. We've seen it derail teams so many times in the past. Heck, we've seen it happen to teams this season. What has been kind of the galvanizing force that has kept this program together? Because not having your head coach for 6 games over the course of the season, bookending the season with 3 games on the front and 3 in the back, it's a tough thing to kind of overcome. What is it about this team that they're kind of bringing together?
Well, it's a really mature team. It's got a lot of veteran players, seniors, 50, even some 60-year seniors who've played a lot of college football, and nothing really phases those guys at this point. I think part of it is the culture that Jim Harbaugh's built. I did a story today about their strength coach, Ben Herbert, who they really feel like is one of the best in college football and really prepares the team mentally to deal with unexpected situations. If you play for Jim Harbaugh, you're going to get used to dealing with outside distractions. That's just part of the deal. It's part of who he is as a coach. He brings some of that stuff on, but he also prepares the team to respond to it. And so I think this team has been through that with Jim Harbaugh before because it is a really experienced team. And then when all of that stuff came up this year, even though the stuff this year was even above and beyond anything Michigan teams had dealt with in the past, but I think guys were ready for that. And they were able to withstand it and not get derailed by it.
It's kind of interesting that, the questions have to be asked because, it's the media's job. But, it seems like the new kind of floating distraction around this is Jim Harbaugh going to coach his last game for the Michigan Wolverines on Monday? What does your gut kind of tell you about Harbaugh in Michigan as opposed to jumping to the NFL?
Well, it's certainly not the first time that he's done this or that we've been prepared to report on Jim Harbaugh potentially leaving for the NFL. It's been certainly the last 2 off seasons, the dominant storyline at Michigan. Mm-hmm. He interviewed for the Minnesota Vikings job 2 years ago, and I think would have taken the job if it had been offered to him. He ended up coming back to Michigan and saying he wanted to win a national championship here, and now he's got the chance to do that. I think a lot of people feel like Michigan wins this game on Monday, he'll have accomplished everything he set out to do at Michigan, and that could make the NFL even more attractive. So I'm totally prepared for another month of NFL rumors and reports after this game. But, yeah, there's a big game to play first, and I think Jim Harbaugh is going to figure out his future after that.
We're talking with Austin Meek. He covers Michigan for The Athletic. You can find him on Twitter or X at by Austin Meek. Let's talk about this game. I mean, the number 1 passing offense in the land. And, look, if you look down the teams that Michigan has played this season, they have played one team that's a top 25 passing team in the country, and that was Maryland, where it was a 1-score game. This defense put in one hell of a performance against an Alabama team, holding them to only 288 yards in the Rose Bowl on Monday. What has to fall right for this team to counter what is the most explosive passing attack in all of college football?
Yeah, I think Michigan needs to get pressure on Michael Penix. Can't let him get comfortable back there. Michigan sacked Jalen Milroe 6 times in the Rose Bowl, and this defensive front has been really good all season. It's a very good offensive line for Washington that won the Joe Moore Award, so it's not going to be easy, but I do think Michigan needs to get pressure on Michael Penix. They need to force a couple turnovers. Michael Penix has thrown some interceptions this year. Michigan's secondary is going to have a huge task in this game. A guy like Will Johnson, Michigan 5-star cornerback, the guy who's probably going to cover Rome Odunze. And then on the other side, Josh Wallace is a transfer from UMass who came in the summer and really locked down that other cornerback job. The secondary is going to have a lot thrown at them in this game because I think Michael Penix is far and away the best quarterback Michigan has faced this year, and Washington has the best overall passing game I think Michigan has faced this year.
Jim Harbaugh absolutely loves his quarterback in J.J. McCarthy, and he called him the best quarterback in Michigan history, which is a pretty long list of really good quarterbacks in college football. What is it that maybe some people are missing about J.J. McCarthy from outside looking in on the Michigan football team, because he's kind of been that steady hand for the Wolverines?
Yeah, the offense that Michigan runs is not an offense where you're going to see a quarterback throw for 4,000 yards. Michigan, even though they've been more balanced this year in terms of throwing the ball more than they did the previous 2 years, it's still the bread and butter for Michigan is the running game, Blake Corum, and that offensive line. So J.J. McCarthy's raw stats probably aren't going to jump off the page at you. And he has some ups and downs. He'll miss some easy throws, and then he'll come back and he'll make a throw that not very many people on the planet can make. And that's one of the things I think maybe sometimes it's frustrating, but it's also just really entertaining to watch him because he does some things on the field that not many quarterbacks can do. So I think internally within the program, there's a really high respect for J.J. McCarthy and everything he brings to the table. And I think he's going to play a long time in the NFL and be a really good quarterback. And it's just a matter of, is he going to lead Michigan to a national championship before then?
We look at Jim Harbaugh's style, and, us out on the West Coast, we've become very familiar with it, whether it's at his time at Stanford or with the San Francisco 49ers. We've seen that style kind of translate everywhere that he's gone. Does this feel to you like a put Washington in a phone booth and control the clock and on the ground with Blake Corum type of game?
Well, I think if Michigan had its way, that is what they would want to do. Want to keep Michael Penix on the sideline, control the ball, control the clock, run the ball with Blake Corum. I think that's the blueprint for Michigan, especially looking at Washington's run defense, which has been middle of the pack this year. I think there's going to be some opportunities for Michigan to run the ball. But I also think Michigan can't get too conservative in this game because they're going to have to score. Michigan's been, as I said, more balanced this year. J.J. McCarthy's ability to create. I think they do need to keep the ball in J.J. McCarthy's hands because sometimes Michigan's offense can sort of go comatose a little bit. They run hot and cold a little bit. I think they got to keep their foot on the accelerator in this game because Washington's going to score. It's a really talented Washington offense, and I think Michigan has to be prepared to go toe-to-toe with that.
Who is going to be the guy that, we know Blake Corum, we know J.J. McCarthy, we know guys like Mason Graham or Will Johnson, like you mentioned. Who's going to be the guy that needs to step up and have a big game for this Michigan team that maybe people don't know about right now?
Well, I'll give you one that you didn't mention, which is Roman Wilson. He's been Michigan's best wide receiver this year. Has really emerged as a playmaker, made a couple huge plays at the end of the Rose Bowl. The touchdown catch to tie the game at the end of regulation. The catch he made before that was incredible. A fingertip catch of a ball that almost was thrown over his head. He's made some amazing catches this year. Another guy in Michigan's offense, you're not going to have a wide receiver who puts up just huge numbers. But some of the plays Roman Wilson has made this year really stand out, and I expect him to have a big game.
All right, and before I let you go, Austin, I mean, Harbaugh is an unintentional quote machine at times. Do you have a Harbaughism that you hold dear to your heart after covering this guy?
Oh boy, oh man, it's so many, such a long list. I mean, the first one that just popped into my head when you asked the question. And I don't even know how he got started talking about this. Did you see the quote from Media Day before the Rose Bowl? That Jesus would have been a 5-star recruit.
Yes.
I guess if you can walk on water, that's probably good for some high marks in the recruiting world. I don't know. I mean, there's so many. Like it's such a long list, but that was the first one that popped into my mind just because it's fresh in my memory.
I love it. Well, thank you for taking a few minutes for us, and safe travels down to Houston covering this national championship game between the undefeated Michigan Wolverines and the unbeaten Washington Huskies. Austin Meek, thank you, man.
All right. Thanks. Appreciate it.
There he is, Austin Meek of The Athletic. Again, you can find him at @ByAustinMeek on Twitter. Does a fantastic job covering the Wolverines. Dude, Harbaugh has always been like this. I remember
America.
Yeah, a lot of milk. I remember covering, and Rust, you did a few of these too. They used to do the Pac-12 coaches conference call every Wednesday.
Oh, yes. I remember sitting and recording those and cutting them up for primetime use later.
And I vividly remember, you probably have some of these too. Harbaugh would be he was the only coach that would do it on speakerphone.
Mm-hmm.
And you would hear, like, in the middle of his conference call, people would be coming in. At one point, he was doing dishes And he was in his, like, somebody's like, Coach, are you in the kitchen? He's like, no, I'm in my office, just doing some dishes. He'd be packing a can of chew as a reporter is asking a question. Like, you could hear it. Like, you just go,
whip.
Yep. And then you'd hear, like, all of a sudden he had, like, his speech would be gurgled for, like, the next 3 answers. And you're like, oh man, he's a different bird, man. And a damn good football coach, but boy, Harbaugh's out there. And this is really interesting about if this could be his final game.
Do you suppose those conference calls were about their least favorite part of the job?
It's one of them. Like, the Pac-12 like did away with them. I think.
What else would rank down there with it?
I think the booster glad handing.
Yeah.
I think that like the amount that you have to do that is even more.
Right.
And that's why they say, like, hey, go to a school where you don't have that many cooks in the kitchen to keep happy, right? Yeah. But you always have to do it, no matter if they're your multi-million-dollar donors or, the season ticket holders. You got to go and do that. I think that may be up there, but the conference, but then again, those people, all they want to do is just be around the program that you love too, right? I mean, they're not there to ask the difficult questions or the hard questions. I think those media days were probably just, those conference calls were a lot. And I'll tell you what, there's a lot of writers that you could tell they're writing a specific story.
Yes.
And a coach will get a question about a player on another team that they're not playing that week. And he's just like out of left field. Like, I don't know how to answer that right now. I don't think we play them this year. It's just like, okay. So yeah, you're probably right. That's probably the.
Yeah. Well, I guess when it comes down to it, it was a longer exercise for us cutting it up than it was for the coaches on it. Cause they're probably on there for 20 minutes at a time.
Yeah. And then they're out.
Yeah.
And then they're just done. All right. Great stuff from Austin Meek. I mean, look, we talked to Chris Fetters, dogmen.com, the Huskies perspective. We got Austin Meek on the Michigan perspective. It's weird that we think of this national championship game, the number one passing offense in the country, and one of the top offensive attacks in Michigan. Don't look at yards per game if you want that. Look at efficiency with Michigan. I mean, they will drag you down the field. This game is going to come down to defense, and I think that's what both Fetters and Meek were kind of alluding to, that defensive guys are going to come up huge for these teams.
Who can get the stops.
Whoever wins the national title is going to come down to which defense performs better.